Hi, my name is Blair Murphy. I'm the curator of exhibitions at Museum of Contemporary Art, Arlington, and I'm really happy to be here tonight with Andrew Barco, our current resident artist here at the Innovation Studio. We are here in person and also live streaming. So hello to the live streaming audience. I wanted to do a quick plug for the new exhibitions that we have up at the museum at MOCA Arlington. If folks haven't been over to the museum, we have new shows that we just opened last weekend. We're open Wednesday through Sunday, 12 to 5, with 4 solo exhibitions and a 3-person group show with some really fantastic sculpture and installation and some other work. So if you haven't been to the museum yet, please come check it out. We're over at 3550 Wilson Boulevard. Let's see. We also have a number of upcoming events. We do artist talks here and at the museum, and classes and workshops in both locations too. So if you haven't yet, we have an email list you can sign up for, and we also promote all of that stuff on social media. So please follow us if you're on those platforms. I am really happy to be here tonight with Andrew. Andrew is the current resident artist here at the Innovation Studio. We have a 6-week residency program here where artists are here working in the space on a project, interacting with the public, and often doing a workshop or two as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to do a quick introduction of Andrew. So Andrew's work, as you'll hear more about, is concerned with the often strange and improbable ways ideas and habits can be transmitted across cultural landscapes and through time. He researches intellectual, cultural, and craft histories and takes his viewers on philosophical detours. Andrew has exhibited professionally since 2003 with his work featured in group exhibitions in many US cities, including Chicago, Illinois, Baltimore, Maryland, Boston, Massachusetts, Durham, North Carolina, Hartford, Connecticut, and New Orleans, Louisiana. He has presented major performance work at venues in Chicago and Boston, and was a featured artist in the Rapid Pulse International Performance Festival in 2013 and the Rapid Pulse Tour in 2018. Andrew also has extensive experience working in arts education and with youth, including through the Sky Art Youth Art Program in Chicago, Illinois, with whom he staged public interventions erecting temporary monuments to historical Black female Chicagoans. Andrew's had solo exhibitions with 3 Walls Gallery in Chicago, 5-7 Dell in Boston, and in Durham, North Carolina with West Village and Transom Gallery, and also here in Arlington with MOCA Arlington as part of our Solos program a couple years ago. Born and raised in Durham, North Carolina, Andrew holds an MFA in sculpture from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and moved from Chicago to Northern Virginia within the last few years. So it's been great to work with him a couple times now since he's been here. So we're gonna have a little bit of a conversation, have some questions for Andrew, and then also take some audience questions. So if you guys want to jump in later on, you're welcome to. Andrew, I thought it would be helpful to start out talking about your process. You have a really research-heavy process, which I think isn't something that people always necessarily sort of think about with contemporary art, that in addition to the physical making, there's often this really pretty in-depth and focused research that can happen. And I thought your solo show at MOCA Arlington that happened a couple years ago might be a good way to kind of talk about that process and sort of what a project looks like for you kind of from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
So, and we have some images we can share up here too.
I first want to say that research can look completely different for contemporary artists, even who are research heavy. I like to think of my research not like the academic writing an essay and going in and studying a bunch of books and then sharing with the public something that they've learned. I'm much more interested in, so I just read a book about fungus, and it's this popular scientist who's already studying fungus, but then he goes and he tries magic mushrooms, and he goes on a search for truffles with a truffle dog, and this kind of thinking about research as something that takes over your life, that is also is deeply, and for me, that it's an adventure. It's an adventure that begins as a maker. Like that's sort of like the beginning. That's like the place where the thinking and the discovery really happens. I'll give a couple examples from my past practice, and I'll talk about this piece as well. So, for example, I have taken a taxidermy deer head to the optometrist office to figure out the right prescription of lenses to see out of its eyes. I have gone on a bike trip to Terracotta, Illinois, to get the original terracotta clay that built so many of Chicago's skyscrapers after the Chicago fire. In the piece that I showed at MOCA Arlington, I was really thinking about how, as an artist, to deal with like big international crises like the Syrian war. There was some reading, but also some of the adventures that happened for me was learning this intricate Syrian craft of khatam. I don't know if you have a great picture of it, but it's just a tiny little detail here. This is sort of so I do projects that often take many years to accomplish, and part of it is that I do go on these sort of long, digressive, in deep dives that really are learning experiences for me and transformative experience for me. So just this little boundary around this pool in this one part of this large installation was like a 3-month adventure of trying to learn this this intricate craft work.
And that was also embedded within a sort of elaborate story that was sort of the mythology of the whole project.
Yeah. So the larger context of this whole story is artists doing a play version of a documentary on the Syrian war, and they're all personally struggling themselves with what does it mean to be an artist, grappling with the world around them. I guess be similar to this piece, that there is like a central image that was sort of arose, which was a place that I have been in Chicago, a underground pool that's hidden away in the storage area of a skyscraper, and that sort of became I don't know, I guess the set for the whole project for all the poetry that I was bringing in, all of the ideas that I was learning about through the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was a text sort of heavy installation too, so the narrative story was part of it as well, a sort of fictional story that you had written based on a documentary.
So I was, and what's interesting about this is that a lot of the sculptural work in here happened before I had this whole narrative created. So there's a back and forth between sort of making these objects and the textual element, these sort of poem monologues of each of the characters that actually arose from sitting and contemplating these sort of sculptural figures that I had created. Since I created a text element that was also my own place for reflection and digestion of what I had made through this whole process.
Yeah. And so with the residency here, you're starting on a very new project, kind of early in the process, that's focused on this idea of the folly. Can you talk a little bit about the folly and introduce that idea?
Yeah. So if in folly is an older way of saying foolishness, right? And so I think that's pretty good interpretation because usually the cited example of folly would be the fool of the court gesture. I have gotten, so there is so I came to this thought around the folly from the architectural side, which is these sort of large-scale architectures that would be in a sort of an estate or garden setting that would have no purpose. This is like a perfect example of a large building that has no rooms in it. It's mostly just on a facade. They were, I think they just sort of also staged the experience of the landscape and to frame it. The other big direction I'm coming at from the idea of the folly is a book by Erasmus in Praise of Folly, which is a satire that was written about 100 years before Shakespeare. So foolishness, a deity, has written this book in praise of folly. Because no one else was available for the job, the deity took it upon herself to praise folly. So it's satirical. There's a lot of whimsy to it, but it's also there's lots of really deep ideas there about. The whole long section is how important foolishness is important for human life. Like, we would not be able to have friends if we weren't being able to to not recognize the foolishness of our friends or the bad behaviors of our friends. There's a deeper level that is in that book, and that I'm excited about getting to the place in this project where some of those layers are pulled out. So here's another picture of a folly. So this is I think this is an Italian folly where did like the gates of hell from Dante's Inferno. So I think that so exciting about this as like a reference to an artist. Like, there's a lot of whimsy in the idea of the folly, and almost like the definition of it is like no one else cares enough, the same amount as you do. Like, so it's already at the sort of in the realm of the personal relationship of the art to their sort of a project that they are taking on themselves.
And these were things people sometimes would build on their estates, as sort of, you said, also like an almost amusement to for their friends or people who came to visit, that they could walk around and see.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. There's definitely a big part of friendship is deeply involved in the idea of the folly. Like, it's a chance for conversation. It's a conversation starter on the large scale. It's sometimes there are even like rooms for conversation, and there are ideas that are interjected into the landscape that are meant not for just for yourself, but for the people that you're in your circle with.
Yeah, to contrast maybe between the idea of an amusement and the effort that goes into it, like it being an actual architectural structure as opposed to just, here's a funny sketch.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely. And and I guess that's relevant to my practice. You know, it's often like these sort of large-scale, multi-year projects that I feel like I'm a bit of a fool sometimes. Like, why am I still working on this piece 7 years later? But there is a bit of reflection going on in this the take on this turn towards the folly. So the image that we see here of the sculpture that I have, as far as it's gotten so far, comes from Shakespeare, from Midsummer's Night Dream. And the way that I got there is that I was reading In Praise of Folly, and I came across a phrase, what fools these myrtles be. And it's like, oh, clearly Shakespeare was reading this book. And
right, because it predates
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And it's written in Latin. I know Shakespeare knew Latin because the Ovid's Metamorphosis is all over his plays. And to me, I think there's something interesting about the sort of natural drift to like coming to the image of Bottom the Weaver to stand in for this project. To me, that's exciting is that it's like a image that a lot more people can relate to. He's a wonderfully articulated character in Shakespeare, this sort of boastful man. There's a whole scene where he's an actor, and in that play within the play, and he wants to play all the roles because he thinks he's so awesome as an actor. But it's also Bottom the Weaver, and I also got really excited about taking that on as the image because here's another craftsman, right? And I in this piece, I've actually cast my own hands as the hands for this sculpture. So I'm putting myself in this piece, and I'm connecting myself. I think it's important to acknowledge my foolishness if I'm taking on the concept of foolishness on as my topic of my work, but also that I'm also interested in space for reflection on what does it mean to be a maker, and how does that relate to these topics.
And for those of us a little behind on our Shakespeare, can you share a little more about how does Bottom the Weaver wind up being a donkey?
Oh, yeah.
And how does that kind of fit in with the ethos of A Midsummer Night's Dream?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so what's fun is it is almost Midsummer's Night right now. We're like 2 days away from it. So if you guys want to have a Midsummer Night party and I'll dress up in donkey ears, I'm all for it. The play is set at the sort of special night, the summer solstice of time of fairy magic and a bunch of young people go off to the woods, and the wood sprites create all sorts of mischief for them. So some of the townsfolk include the troupe of actors that also get stuck out in the woods, and the Puck, the mischievous sprite, turns Bottom into a donkey, and also gives a love potion to the Queen of the Fairies, so that she falls in love with them, mostly to create all sorts of ridiculous comic moments of longing, lustful speeches to the donkey, which is a lot of great imagery in Shakespeare, and lots of beautiful, flowery, forest word-filled poetry. So this is a artist rendering of Tatiana, the Queen of the Fairies. She gives him a what do you call it? A wreath of flowers. I think eventually I'll make that for this guy as well.
And once you started thinking about Midsummer Night's Dream and Bottom in relation to the folly, then you made a choice at some point to work with concrete, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think was fairly new for you. How did that decision sort of manifest, and and how has that been working with it?
Yeah. So I've started to be thinking about concrete because of interest in garden sculpture. So I'm a bit obsessed with native gardening and creating our backyard into a wild, crazy ecosystem, and straight out of Midsummer's Night Dream. So concrete is a very natural material for that. My first project that I made, you see the image on some of the publicity of my squirrel fountain. Made a fountain with a squirrel spitting out water. It is so. In contrast to woodworking, which is a lot of what I've done over the last 25 years, it's really different, right? So in my woodworking, I'm doing a subtractive process, removing material to get to the artwork. In concrete, it's the whole mixture of cast and additive processes, I would say that's gone surprisingly well for a material that I don't know all that well. I am still just sort of blundering my way through it. Having some experience with casting, and doing fiberglass construction in my past to help. So just like as I was talking about with learning the katam, sort of a big part of all of my sort of larger projects is this self-learning. Taking on new materials, being in the place of not an expert, right? I want opening myself up, right, in these sort of larger, trying to learn about these sort of larger poetic intersections, is sort of putting myself back into the learner's mind, And like, it's like, oh, I don't actually know all the associations of concrete right now. I'm going to jump in, and people that I meet, like in coming in, visiting during my artist residency, are going to talk about their experiences. Someone at the workshop, we'll talk about in a minute, talked about the use of terracotta in architectural sculpture. I've seen a lot of the work that I'm inspired by was concrete in Chicago, but there's a lot, especially this was Art Deco period, which I'm really looking at closely, was also done in terracotta. So it feels to me like this place of opening up and discovery, and hopefully be a discovery along with the viewers. We can all sort of go on sort of this adventure together.
Yeah, and the workshop, we do have some pictures. And yeah, I sort of, as you guys were talking, I'm sort of thinking more about the connection between concrete as an architectural material and this idea of the folly being rooted in architecture, and like even the sort of garden gnome almost character. That's sort of a nice connection there. And then you had a volunteer to do a face cast.
Yeah, in fact, you can see it right over there. This is another experiment, and I really sort of enjoyed how it turned out. So in the workshop, I asked people to do sort of different little tiny pieces of not try to make something complete in the workshop, but to make a little detail. And I told them that I would combine those details into a piece by the end of the residency. The piece that you can see over there, that just came out of the workshop, there's a whole bunch of different types of like cast items. There's cast fingers. There's elements that are constructed off of wire mesh and coated in concrete, and of course the face cast. And I used concrete to put all the pieces together, and then I coated it in 3 different clays from Virginia that I've collected, and so it made that the coloring for it. And I think to me, which was exciting, is like this idea of being able to work with like participants in a workshop and use that to generate artwork without necessarily getting stuck in some of the ruts of like community murals can get, in terms of everyone has to have their own place and all has to sort of be very clearly delineated authorship. But it's a chance we're all learning how to do this concrete together. And I promise I'll do something with it.
Right. Yeah, I'm
not gonna know what it is until I like do it.
Yeah.
So it's gonna, but we're going on this little bit of adventure together, and I'm sort of promising I'll see it through. So.
Yeah, and that kind of is just really in line with the spirit, I think, of the residency that we've tried to cultivate, and that sense of having this engagement with the public, especially early on with your project. And you sort of mentioned this a little bit, sort of getting people's ideas around like their responses to concrete and how they think about it. I was curious how that, especially because you are pretty early in the process of this project, kind of how that impacted the way you were thinking about it, or how you think it might impact the project going forward.
Yeah. At this stage, like some of the big questions in my mind are, because I really want to do work that connects to people. I'm not interested in doing work that you only can get if you've done all of this research to be able to understand it. I want to do work that if you do want to think about it and to learn, like for example, the work I did on the Syrian war, like there's lots of references to Syrian neighborhoods that I didn't go and spell out, but if you wanted to learn about that, that's a great journey for you to go on, just as was a great journey for me to go on. But the interesting question is like, okay, what are the images that resonate with people? How does this actually work as a portal towards the other poetry? I have my own instincts about it, but it's really great to talk about it with people and see whether or not like the eyes glaze over or. What's great is being able to adapt my work and try to figure out what's the core, and then where are all of the different directions it branches out to. What is all the different poetry, all the different moral, political, personal questions that resonate with it, and how can the project start to open up more of those doors. Right now I have image of a concrete donkey person. There's a lot more that I want to talk about with this piece that can be communicated with just that image. So I don't have the folly as architecture is not fully present there. You can see here on the floor, I'm working on the next step of being able to mount this as a sort of remnant piece of architecture.
Yeah, with the wall that is being constructed from the sort of brick facade, which ties back to there was a specific early architectural folly that you mentioned when we first talked
the Colosseum.
The Colosseum, the Colosseum, but made out of
brick. But it's only it's just the facade. I think that there's something really interesting about the history of follies and these sort of just facades of architecture, and what does that mean? To have like and they're not. Some of them are not even trying to be like architectural ruins. They're just like the facade of a house, and that's a very strange thing to have in a landscape when you can walk around and see the back side of it and know that it's flat.
Right, it's a reference to the thing, but it doesn't actually function.
Right. And I really don't. I have ideas about, but I have done experiments of trying to really bring out all of the satirical aspects of the praise of folly. Like that right now is very minimized, and.
Yeah, because I know that was an interest of yours in the beginning, this connection between folly and satire, and even with that example, sort of what's real and what's fake, being
absolutely
a part of it too.
I mean, satire is I've always been inspired by satire, in its position being one of often, like great satire is one that is both about willing to point out the things that are really wrong about the world, but also can also be a place of actual openness in a way that like doing like a straightforward like a political screed or would not have. So it actually can be a lot more playful. It being playful even about authorship or there's a lot to start to mine as I move forward on this project, and that's a whole big aspect that is waiting on the sidelines, but is. 6 weeks is pretty short.
Yeah, 6 weeks is, that is also important to think through, especially in the, I know how much your work tends to kind of build over time. So that's
Right.
just like the very, very beginning. So, great. Well,
But I really appreciate having this time and the space to really, and I feel like it's been great to be able to focus on a image of one core piece of this, and that I think that's going to be really great moving forward, to have that, have the space and mental space to get that, the beginning of this work underway.
that's great. Well, that's wonderful to hear. I think it's a great place to wrap up and see if there are any audience. Do you have a mic if there's audience questions? Okay.
I may have two. So the first question is back to the beginning of the conversation. When you had your solo show at the main museum, I was really interested around your process when you said you created the sculptures, and then after that was completed, if I remember correctly, then you went and wrote the poetry. And I was surprised by that because as a writer myself, I was wondering, after you write the poetry, do you go back to change any of the sculpture based on what come forth as you were writing?
Yes. The sculpture. Okay, so the answer is that the sculptures, I started this early in the pandemic, and I didn't have access to any models, so I asked my friends to make different poses for me, and then this is what I used. But you'll in the pictures, they often have different props. They have each of them have often like a world that they're part of. So this one has a long piece of fabric made out of wood that was not in part of the original image. That sort of came out of once I really figured out what that character was talking about. Really trying to figure out what's the act that character is doing. And before I was just like, okay, I just wanted this character, but I didn't completely understand what their motivation was. So once I really sort of had a deeper sense of what that motivation was, it was easier to sort of figure out how to finish it up, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I have one more.
Okay.
So I was really taken by the gesture, archetype, or figure that comes forth in your conversations, along with the photos that you provided of the follies, and the sculpture behind you that's sort of turned into a donkey. So through your process of making these sculptures and these pieces of artwork, does the gesture or folly come forth sometimes that you didn't realize, and then something playful happens and you're sort of shocked as an artist that, oh wow, I didn't see this turning into this, but now I see the play in it?
Yeah. So the gesture, and this is not something I fully understood when I was making the decisions of it, but there is a lot of Roman or Greek sculpture of the philosopher who's making a gesture like this, except that it's more raised, right? It's more like the more powerful outward, like assertive gesture. And then in mine, my donkey man, in my folly, it's lowered. So it's a much more, maybe it's more humble, maybe it's more just, I don't know, right? Gesture. And that's something that's really interesting about somewhere between philosopher and I don't know. I had up here a phrase also from In Praise of Folly. There's a great word that, and this is one of the discoveries that I'm going to take with me. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's awesome. The word that Erasmus has is fool-osopher, which is so good. I don't know what that's going to turn into, but it's, those great discoveries. Like, I've been waiting for that word my whole life. So, so now, I don't know how that's going to play out in this project, but it's a great discovery, and I'm looking forward to what may come.
Great. Thanks. Well, thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you for
being
this
here.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Really
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. All right. Thanks for being here. Andrew's here until the June 26th or 27th, so we can come back and see how things have progressed in the next week or so. So, all right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.